Hey everyone, welcome back. I wanted to do something a little bit different today. I wanted to pull a couple really brief quotes from some pretty famous investors and personalities that you've probably heard before and just give you my take on them. There's a lot of information and noise out there around what advice is best, what you should follow and when, and it can be confusing. Also, a lot of advice is very oversimplified, including some of the quotes that I'm going to discuss here in today's video, but hopefully you can take away a thing or two from each investor, personality, etc., and apply to your financial life. So with that, let's get started. Quote number 1, do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving. Warren Buffett. So this is a really good practical application of a pretty simple principle in that so many people nowadays, they try to invest after everything else is paid and done and settled. But what ends up happening is you oftentimes don't have a lot of money left to save after you've spent it in a given month. The best approach that I would advise when it comes to this is to automate your investing. So putting monthly contributions into an IRA or an employer payroll deduction into a 401k or a 403b, the easier you can make your saving, the more that will help you grow your investments and wealth for the future and then spend after that has already been taken care of. If you think about a payroll deduction, for example, you never even see that money, right? You've already saved before you even could spend it. Now think on the other side of that. If you get your paycheck, spend, there's a bill here, there's a celebration here, something unexpected comes up and I have to pay for this, and then at the end of the month or the end of the 2 weeks, you're out of money and then it's like, oh, well, I guess I can't save this month or these 2 weeks. If that cycle continues, it's going to be really hard to ever get good traction and consistency when it comes to building that savings muscle. So automate your savings, and I completely agree with Buffett here. Try to save first before spending. On to quote number 2. So Robert Kiyosaki is quoted as saying, "The rich don't work for their money, they make their money work for them." There is a lot of truth to this quote. This gets us into this discussion of active versus passive income. And when certain individuals attain a certain level of wealth, their money is making so much money in the form of growth and dividends and interest that they're not even really doing anything physically. There's no active labor or job necessarily whereby they're earning an income because they don't need to, right? The money that they've invested and saved is now so powerful and so compounded that their money is making so much money that it's doing all the work for them. Just to put this in context, if somebody has investments, and again, those investments could be in mutual funds, ETFs, real estates. When someone's net worth is such a significant amount, let's say $5 million, if they make even 10% on their money by not doing anything, it's just interest, gains, dividends, etc., right? The money's work to help put more money in your pocket. The takeaway each year there, assuming a 10% rate of return annually, is $500,000, and I would think it's fair to say that most people can live off of that. So again, this notion of passive income where you put your money in a retirement account, 401k, IRA, 403b, in good investments and funds to allow that money to earn money and then compound further, you can get to a certain point where your money is working so hard that it may be actually earning more than you are by your job. That's what this quote gets at, and it's a really great principle to strive for in your wealth building journey. Moving into quote number 3, debt is dumb, cash is king, Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey is another super prominent financial personality and has been for a few decades. His main narrative as it relates to personal finance is to eliminate debt in its entirety, and there is a lot of validity to this. He would argue never take out a student loan, never take out a car loan. Mortgages, he's kind of so-so about. He personally, I know, does not do them, but he doesn't necessarily think it's the worst thing for the average American today. But the important takeaway here from a personal finance perspective specifically is that when you have debt, whether it's a credit card, a student loan, a mortgage. That means that every month, the money that you're earning, any debt that you have, the first dollars that come in go right to that. So it already out of the gate minimizes your margins because you're owing vendors or banks or utility companies or whatever. You owe them money in the form of debt. Dave would argue eliminate all that so that all the money that comes to you, minus taxes, is your own at that point. There are instances where debt can be a little more appropriate, but as a good principle moving forward, I very much agree with this for 98% of scenarios where you want to avoid debt when possible, whether it's for credit cards, consumer debt, personal loans. Please avoid them in every scenario. Sometimes student loans, certainly mortgages, there's a little bit of justification there, but it's a pretty solid principle to live your life trying to stay as debt-free as possible. So definitely agree with this. Great words to live by as you increase your net worth by, again, increasing your income, minimizing your debts and or liabilities, thereby increasing the margin or the difference that you can take home and keep. Moving on to quote number 4. Stop wasting money on a $5 coffee. Kevin O'Leary, of course, famous from Shark Tank. So this is an interesting concept here. I don't fully agree with this idea if you're financially responsible in other facets of your life. You may have heard of this phenomenon called the latte effect, where if you spend, again, $5 on coffee every day, 30 days a month, that's $150. If you were to put that into an investment, compound it over time, it can end up being tens, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars, depending on your time horizon. I don't want to get into the math of it, but there's something to be said about it if you are a spender where there's a little bit here and a little bit here. It can add up and it can become very significant. Now, this is not to say that you can't have a $5 coffee or get takeout every now and then, Grubhub, DoorDash, etc. But just keep in mind, it's like a drop of water in a bucket that, yeah, 1 or 2 or 3 drops, they're not going to have a big effect on the amount of water in the bucket. But if you're constantly a little drip here, a little drip there, a little pour here, a little pour there, eventually the bucket's going to empty out. So what I would take away from this, again, there is something to be said about the latte effect, where a lot of small expenses hinder and slow your wealth building potential. But if you're cautious and aware of spending in other places in your life, this probably won't slow you drastically from amassing a safe, comfortable future for yourself. And lastly, moving on to quote number 5, Grant Cardone says, "Your house is not an investment, it's a liability." This is another interesting one here. I can definitely see why this is controversial. A house is an investment insofar as it holds value, it typically gains value, but I think in this notion of the American dream where every person should strive to be a homeowner, it's not uncommon to overlook where there are liabilities. For example, utilities you didn't know needed replacements, roofs that you didn't know needed to be fixed. Those are all examples of unexpected or phantom costs when buying a home that I think are easy to not acknowledge or even know are there if you are aspiring to buy a home. Another good piece of advice if you're a renter now and looking to be a homeowner is that the rent you pay every month, while yes, it can increase year over year and at each renewal, but the rent is the most you'll pay in a given month. Your mortgage, if you're a homeowner, is the least you'll pay in a given month because you'll have things like property taxes, you'll have yard waste pickup, you'll have broken appliances. So while I don't fully agree with the idea that a house is not an investment, I don't think that it should be seen as that for the typical person who is just trying to get a home, save in their 401k or 403b or IRA, and amass wealth to create a good retirement for themselves. But there are certainly liabilities and unexpected costs that people should be prepared for as they enter home ownership. So those are all the quotes I had for you today. You probably have heard of some of these people at some point in your financial research. Again, if you're watching this video, thank you for tuning in. Let me know if this was helpful. I think it's good to use advice or words from somebody else to create a baseline of understanding and share knowledge as it relates to personal finance. Keep in mind too that every person's individual journey is going to be unique, right? So where I might give my take on home ownership, for example, that might be a different approach to somebody who is maybe a little younger, maybe a little older. But let me know if these types of videos are helpful. It's kind of my little take on a React video. And as always, thanks for tuning in, and keep an eye on the channel for the next video. Have a great day.